Hey everyone, Tactics here with another Season 3 Mythic Plus guide, this time going through the returning Legion dungeon, which thematically fits pretty well with patch 10.2, Darkheart Thicket. Just like with my other dungeon guides this season, I'll be taking a look at the trash and boss abilities, how I would handle them, as well as showing off my recommended pug-friendly route to help you guys start the season out right. I've also got a couple written resources available for everyone, including my Season 3 Trash Ability spreadsheet and the brand new written guides in collaboration with Method, both of which will be linked down in the description if you want to check them out. With all that said, let's dive into the dungeon, and to start, you're going to be facing a variety of different beast mobs, and these are actually quite dangerous. So the first is Frenzied Nightclaws. These are the cat mobs, and they will target a random ranged player with Grievous Rip. This is a pretty nasty physical hit and bleed that will remain until they're healed above 90% HP. And because this only targets ranged players, if you only have one or even two available in your group, they can get pretty bullied by these mobs. And that hit is, like I said, not insignificant. So ranged players, you're going to want to pop a defensive whenever you pull some Nightclaws. Mind Shattered Screechers are a bit nicer. They really only have one cast in Unnerving Screech. This is a big disorient hit on the entire party, so you just want to make sure you interrupt or use a CC to stop every single cast. Festerhide Grizzlies are another nasty mob here. Their Maddening Roar ability is a shadow hit, but the real issue here is that it applies a stacking damage taken increase from this hit by 25% for 30 seconds. So there's a pull in here with two Grizzlies. Obviously, those are going to stack it up twice as fast, but even with only a single Grizzly, they will refresh that buff, and because it is a Lieutenant mob, you're not able to CC it, so you're going to want to make sure you're defensiving at higher stack counts. They'll also use Spew Corruption. This just spawns a few ads that will fixate random players and kind of leave behind puddles. These ads are fully CCable, so I just recommend locking them down. Hopefully close to the Grizzly and just cleave them down. I wouldn't hard focus them because they do despawn when you kill the Grizzly itself. Crazed Razorbeaks are the final beast in this area. Again, quite simple, so 50-50 with hard and simple. And these guys, they'll just do a propelling charge straight forward in a line, targeting towards where the tank is. So the tank, all you need to do is point this at a wall, ideally, but just away from your party. And then once the cast actually starts, you're free to actually sidestep it, move out of the way so you don't get hit by that ability. A couple druid mobs also show up in this area. The first is the Dreadsoul Ruiner. They will spam cast Despair at your tank, which is a shadow hit that also applies a stacking healing reduction magic debuff. So if any of these do end up going off, you can just dispel that debuff off the tank, but ideally you want to kick most of these. They also have Star Shower. This is not super important. It's interruptible or stoppable with a CC, but even if you don't get this kickoff, basically it just means you need to do a little bit of movement and avoid the swirlies on the ground. I'm sure casters would definitely appreciate having this ability not go off, but for the most part, there's not too much of a punishment. The other druidic mob in this area are the Dreadsoul Poisoners. These guys are just kind of spider mobs, and they'll put out Nightmare Toxin on a player. This is a poison debuff. It's a 6-second dot, and then it explodes on expiration. So you just want to make sure when this goes out, you move away from your friends, and that gets a poison dispel, or you pop a personal if you don't have a poison dispel, and you have that throughout the actual dot portion of the ability. From there, you'll reach Archdruid Glaidalis, hopefully I said that right, and he's going to use a lot of these abilities that we just kind of talked about from those beast mobs. So he's got a Grievous Leap ability. Notably, this will always charge to the furthest player before jumping back towards the tank, so you can actually 100% bait this one just by having a player stand the furthest away. And this is good because it allows you to rotate whoever is taking that bleed to be a player that has a defensive available. Healers as well, make sure you top these players as soon as they do get that bleed, because again, it will go away at 90% HP if they're healed above that, and that just drastically decreases the overall damage you have to heal in this fight. Primal Rage is going to be a charge attack on the tank. It's a little bit different though, because you have to actually dodge it while the boss is in motion, just because the first part of this charge will kind of follow your position. The other thing though, it's not a big deal if you don't dodge it. It's a pure physical hit, so you can just use a defensive and just eat this whole combo, not worry about that. Because this is a charge, I do recommend kind of tanking the boss and facing him towards the outside kind of ring that you're in, and having just the rest of your party on the inner side of that ring, with of course your one player baiting being further back from the rest of the group. Now, throughout this fight, the boss will occasionally spawn 2 Nightmare Abomination ads, and again, these act a lot like those ads that the Grizzlies spawn, so they'll fixate random players, and they're going to leave behind nightfall puddles on the ground. Use stuns, use things like slows, knockbacks, ursuls to kind of keep these mobs locked down. Don't let them reach their target, and just kind of cleave them down with the boss. Moving on towards the next boss, you're going to find some Rot-Heart Dryads. These guys basically just throw a bunch of spears. They've got their regular throw spear ability, which is a random target physical hit, and they've got their poison spear ability, which is a random target 12-second poison dot that also has a healing reduction. So again, poisonous spells are probably going to put in a lot of work in this dungeon. This is a good one to dispel off ASAP. There's going to be a lot of flowers in this area called Vilethorn Blossoms. They only have a single ability in Root Burst that just spawns a 7-yard swirly on the ground, which you want to move out from. These are mostly kind of throwaway mobs, but they do interact with the Rot-Heart Keepers in this area. These guys have the corrupted infusion aura around them, and basically all these blossoms, they're going to be constantly healing for 5% of their max health every second while there's a Rot-Heart Keeper, meaning these are usually going to be your focus target in this area. Outside of that aura, they'll occasionally just cast Vile Mushrooms, which spawns 3 mushrooms under random players. They're going to slowly grow, and then eventually, once they're fully grown, if you ever step near them, they will detonate. So just basically, area denial, stay away from the spooky mushrooms. Just before the next boss, there's going to be a bunch of Nightmare Dwellers in the area, and these guys have a single cast in Tormenting Eye. It is a random target channel, and if the channel is able to complete, it'll fear the player for 4 seconds. So you want to make sure every single channel is kicked or stopped before it is able to complete. Once you defeat all the dwellers in this area, you'll be able to take on Oakheart, and this is a very scary boss for tank players. There's basically 2 different tank busters to be aware of. The first is another frontal in Nightmare Breath. This is fixated on the tank, so you can't sidestep out of it, so make sure you point the boss away from the rest of your party. Something to note about this frontal, though, is that it only has a 25-yard range, so it is actually possible to leap backwards and avoid it entirely if you have enough mobility. This can be exceptionally beneficial as it would allow you to save defensives for the next tank buster, Crushing Grip. Pretty nasty here. Again, a bunch of nature damage over 5 seconds. It also picks the tank up into the air. You want to 100% make sure you have some form of major defensive or multiple smaller defensives for every single cast of this because it is lethal. Outside of that, everyone should just be aware of the Shattered Earth party hit. This is really where other players who aren't the tank would want to defensive, as it's a pretty large hit and also has a knockback attached to it. So be aware of where you're actually getting pushed back into. In particular, try not to get knocked into the strangling roots that spawn. So basically these will spawn 3 at a time under a random player, and these are just puddles on the ground, and if you touch them you'll be rooted in place and take some ticking damage. So these are totem effects as well, so you can't actually cleave off of the boss onto them. You'd have to swap to them specifically and kill them, which is not ideal, but instead you can clear them with movement freeing effects. So things like Blessing of Freedom, things like Druid Shapeshift, that kind of thing can be used to actually clear these thorns entirely, and that is useful not only to conserve space, but also because when the Uproot ability is cast, it'll spawn a Vilethorn sapling ad for each active strangling roots on the field. So by clearing these roots, you can reduce the number of ads you have to deal with here. Note that if you do get aggro on any of these ads, it's super nice for you to run towards your tank a little bit because, of course, you don't want your tank spinning around a frontal at you to pick up those ads, right? So give your tank a hand here, running closer to the boss so that they can just easily cleave those ads and get aggro. Once you defeat Oakheart, you can begin to make your way through a swamp towards the next boss. This area is full of these hate spawn slimes around in large packs, and they have a pretty nasty on-death AoE in Dreadburst. So just be careful if you like double pull the groups of slimes here, or even triple pull if you're feeling crazy. It can be very, very dangerous if you kill all these mobs around the same time. So be careful. If you are killing a bunch of these at the same time, make sure you use a defensive. There are also bigger slime guys in this area called Blood Tainted Furies. These are lieutenant mobs, so they can't be CC'd, similar to those Razorbeaks, similar to those Grizzlies from before. You'll want to watch out for the Blood Bombs, just a big swirly that spawns under a random player. Stay out of those. And we've got another tank targeted charge attack in Blood Assault. This one again is avoidable by the tank, so just make sure you're facing this boss ideally towards a wall, again, just so the travel distance isn't too far, but just away from your group is the most important. And then just watch on death. This mob is actually going to split into 4 blood tainted bursters thanks to the dispersion ability, and you will want to make sure you tanks pick up these ads and kill them ASAP. They're just going to spam cast Blood Bolt on random targets, which is interruptible, but more importantly, eventually they will try and cast Blood Metamorphosis, which will turn them back into a blood tainted fury if they're successful. So 100% make sure that cast is either kicked or stopped with a CC. Also, throughout this area, you're going to see a bunch of eggs just all over the place. If you ever touch any of these eggs, it's going to spawn a hate spawn whelpling. These mobs don't really do anything besides melee the tank, so it's not a big deal. Just be aware, tanks, if you see players running close to the eggs, you might need to pick up some extra ads. And that brings us to the Dresaron boss fight. Not sure how to pronounce it. Whatever. Frontals galore in this dungeon. So we've got another frontal here on the tank. Breath of Corruption. But again, differing from previous frontals, this one is not locked onto the tank. So it will target the tank, but the tank can then sidestep it. So keep that in mind. Don't get hit by this breath tanks. Make sure you're facing the boss away from your group here. There's a big pushback in downdraft that is centered on the boss himself. I know back in Legion, this pushback increased based on how far away you were from the boss. I don't know if that's still a thing. It didn't quite seem like it, so maybe that's taken out, but something to keep in mind. Just try and stay relatively close to the boss, use speed boosts, and don't get pushed back into too many of those nightmare eggs around the edge of the platform, though. Honestly, it's probably not bad to step on these on purpose for funnel if you have any funnel classes in your group. Note that shortly after each downdraft, the boss is going to use Earth-Shaking Roar. This is a AoE hit, so that's maybe where you would pop a defensive on this boss fight. And then on a single player, it'll spawn a puddle that is pretty hefty. It deals a significant amount of damage as well, so you want to make sure that coming out of that downdraft, you make sure you are spread out so that multiple people don't get hit by that initial tick from the puddle, because the player that gets chosen basically gets hit by the AoE from the Earth-Shaking Roar, as well as takes a tick at least of that puddle. So be aware of that puddle. Make sure you move out of it ASAP, and then tanks maybe move the boss away from it if it's spawned in melee, as an example. From there, you'll be able to make your way towards the final boss. There's a bunch of like satyr guys over here and imps as well. So they've got Dreadfire imps. They've got a couple casts here. Firebolt is just a tank hit. It's a little fire hit. It's not too scary, so it's a very low priority interrupt here. Higher priority is the Dread Inferno cast. This will target a random player's fire hit with an AoE around them. You can interrupt this, you can also stop this, and the designated player, if it does go off, just needs to get away from their friends. The Tainted Summoner has a couple casts as well. Shadowbolt is the random target shadow hit, so you'll want to kick this over Firebolt. Firebolt, again, very low priority here. And then they also have the Curse of Isolation. This is a random target curse that just deals pulsing AoE damage with a slow as well. So kick that, stop that with a CC, or if you have a curse dispel, you can actually just let these go off and just dispel it ASAP. Tainted Stalker mobs are also in this area, and they just have a single ability in Dark Hunt. This is just going to pick 2 random targets. They'll teleport behind them, do a shadow hit, teleport behind the other one, do a shadow hit, and then go back to the tank. Not super dangerous here, but potentially numbers tuning on Fort Week could be dangerous to squishier players. Tormented Bloodseekers, though, are exceptionally scary for tanks. So these guys have an ability in Dark Soul Bite. It's going to put a nasty disease dot onto the tank. It deals a nature damage hit up front, and then it drains health back to the bats. And obviously, if there's a pack here with 4 bats, they can get 4 sets of this Dark Soul Bite, Dark Soul Drain debuff. And that debuff currently absolutely trucks on the PTR for tanks. One of the hardest hitting tank busters in the patch. As of the recording of this video, maybe gets nerfed, but tanks, you want to be very, very mindful of this pack. You likely want to go into the pack here with 4 Bloodseekers in it, with all defensives up, and you 100% want a Disease Dispel. If you don't have a Disease Dispel in your group, you will want to route around these Bloodseekers and not pull them most likely. So something to keep in mind here. Finally, in the very last pack of the dungeon, you'll find a Tainted Deadeye. These guys just have the Shadow Decoy ability, so they'll spawn a little mob on their original location, move a little bit, and you just need to make sure tanks pick this guy up. And if they are ever not in melee range of the tank, for example, they will stop meleeing and they'll use their bow, and they'll try and cast Scorching Shot at the tank. And this is a fire hit with a 14-second magic dot that you will want to make sure is dispelled off the tank. But ideally, tanks just stay in melee range of this Deadeye, and this shot hasn't fired on PTR if you stay in melee. That brings us to the final boss of the dungeon, the Shadow of Xavius. Healers, there's going to be a magic dispel on this boss fight. Luckily, it's only a single one in Festering Rip, so whenever you see it, just dispel it ASAP. Feed the Weak is going to channel into a random player. It's just damage, but this is likely what you would want to use a personal on because it deals a pretty significant amount of damage over the duration. Now, the interesting mechanics are growing paranoia here, which is going to go on a random player, and basically you're going to get a 20-second debuff, and you have to stay away from all of your friends. You're going to have a little red puddle on you that kind of shows the area, but you need to stay away from your friends for that entire 20-second duration, otherwise you're going to be feared for 5 seconds. The counterpart to that is actually Waking Nightmare, so the boss is going to pick a player to Nightmare Bolt. It's going to deal a shadow hit to them, and it's going to apply Waking Nightmare to them, and this again lasts for 20 seconds, but it's the complete opposite, where instead you need to now stand near at least one other ally, and if you don't, you're going to be silenced and pacified. So kind of a little dance here, because it's possible that you get growing paranoia, and then near the end of the growing paranoia, you'll get hit with a Nightmare Bolt and get Waking Nightmare, so you need to immediately run back in. So you want to stay away from your friends, but not too far. Notably, both of these are total random target abilities, so they can also target the tank, so keep that in mind. My recommendation here is to just generally have most players close to melee of the boss, so that when Waking Nightmare goes out and you need somewhere to stack, melee is always kind of your place to stack. Meanwhile, growing paranoia players can just take a few steps out from the boss, and that works as well. Or even if you're in melee, there is enough space for these debuffs to actually coexist and still be in melee if you're on opposite sides of the boss. Now, when the boss reaches 50% HP, he'll begin casting Apocalyptic Nightmare. You will want to 100% defend of this cast. Like a lot of other bosses that we've talked about in this season, this cast will happen a single time. So you only need to survive it one time. So, put the whole bag in, make sure you have a defensive available when this boss hits 50%. And then basically the fight is the same as it was before, except now there's going to be swirlies that spawn intermittently throughout the room that you'll need to avoid. Tanks, you also want to make sure the boss actually doesn't get hit by these swirlies either, otherwise he's going to gain stacks of Apocalyptic Empowerment, which I believe are 5% damage increase for 10 seconds. So if he eats a couple, he's going to get, 10-second damage increase, maybe 2 stacks, 3 stacks, so you need to make sure he voids swirlies for that 10 seconds, otherwise he's going to refresh the duration of that buff and get pretty scary on those like Feed the Weak casts, for example, or Festering Rip if it gets a few ticks off, right? So try and make sure the boss is also avoiding all of those swirlies. Next up, let's talk pug-friendly route here. As a note, this isn't going to be the 100% most optimal route, but it will be something that is reliable. There's no crazy, huge, difficult pulls in here. I've actually avoided as many difficult pulls as I could, but there is one difference between this and I think most, if not all, of my other simple pug-friendly routes this season, is that there is one invis pot skip here near the start of the dungeon, because there are just some pretty insane difficult pulls here, which especially for the start of the season, I think you're just going to be cursed. They're just going to be, run it down mid-feed type of pulls, so definitely seems like it's going to be better to just avoid them entirely. But if you want to not do the little skip I'm suggesting here, there's no issues with that at all. You can add it in, maybe subtract something later on. But let's get into it here. So the first pull here, we're running all the way up to the bear initially. You basically can just run to like where this pack is and just have the tank tag the bear, group them up. This is a good CD lust pull, that kind of thing. There is 3 cats in this pull, so range players again, it's not a bad idea to just kind of personal ASAP once this pull is grouped immediately. Personal, because there's a good shot you're going to have a cat jumping at you pretty quickly. From there, we move in towards this pack 2 here. You can point these razor beaks just against the wall. There's like a couple spots on the wall you can point them against in here and just tank them over here. They'll go almost nowhere, which is really nice. Try not to point them, at any of these bears here or through. There's a hole over here towards these mobs. That'll be very bad. Make sure they're hitting a wall and not going towards your party. Then you can jump in and around here. There's a little skip here. Actually, you know what? Let's do some movie magic. I will show you the skip. We'll show you the skip. Okay. Here we are. So this is the entrance of the dungeon. Ran through. That's where you kill the little hippogriffs, whatever. Make sure you don't shoot them through this hole. Don't shoot them towards these grizzlies, those grizzlies. And then when you do this skip, you want to come in here. Do not go through this. This will land you on top of this pack. That's not ideal. What you can do instead is you do this. You jump up here. Up the side of this rock. Okay? Jump up the side of this rock. And then you can jump down. And then you can do this patrol right here in this area. And this won't make you pull any of these other mobs out here. So that is what you want to do to actually make sure you get this 3-pack on its own. Not pull it with these guys. Not have someone fall down on top of these guys. All that good stuff. All right, let's just do the route here. Let's do the rest of it here. Here we go. So you're going to go, after you do this 3-pack, you're then going to walk down. You can do these 2 packs together. And this is where we're going to do the skip. So basically, there's these 2 grizzlies. And you know what? I'm here. I'm just going to show you anyways. Basically, how this works is if anyone actually runs up against this there's a wall here created by the green, it'll start the RP. And so what you can do is right here, you can press your invis pot. I'm stealth. You can run around the side here. And this is actually out of range of their aggro table. And so you can run over here and wait for this RP to finish. A lock gate can also be thrown like up onto this tree over here if the warlock knows the spot. And you can also just jump down around here without needing to use invis pots, without needing a rogue for shroud, a mage for greater invis, whatever, if they even take that. Actually, I don't know if they take that, but they could, especially early on in the season. But yeah, that's how you also skip past these 2 grizzlies here. Okay, now we're going to open the... Okay, there we go. So that's how you do those grizzlies. Boss. Moving past, you've got a little 3-pack here. This is just a dryad and some blossoms. Just focus the dryad down, and you can move. If the blossoms have any health left, just move with them. This is where you've got the Rot-Hard Keeper. And basically how this is going to work is going to be a slow pull. These are going to stay at full health because of the Keeper. You want to just kill off the dryad, and then once the Keeper dies as well, you can move into this pack as well. You basically just don't want 2 dryads at once here. That's kind of the rule we're living by. So move into this pack. Kill these guys, and then you can do this. This is a double keeper pull here, and there's a dryad patrol. So again, there's only going to be 1 dryad, not a big deal. Kill these 2 keepers, and then you can cleave down everything else together. And then you're moving into this Nightmare Dweller area. It's actually not too bad pulling all 5 at once and just chaining AoE stops and kicks if you have them, whatever, knockbacks, all that good stuff. But if you're worried about this, you can shorten it, but I don't recommend it. I recommend just trying to grab them all ASAP and syncing them up as best as you can. Then you've got the second boss here, Oakheart, moving up towards the 3rd boss area. Again, watch these hate spawn slimes. Kill them. Maybe use a defensive if you're killing all of these at the exact same time. Same deal with this pack. Usually what I would recommend doing is just pulling this guy onto this pack. When these die and you're stable and you're ready, then move this guy onto this pack kind of deal. Don't actually do all these at once ASAP. Kind of stagger them a little bit. Then you've got the last boss here, and you will jump down this way, and you've got a bunch of pulls. Again, this is that Giga Dangerous tank pull I was talking about with the Bloodseekers. If you don't have a Disease Dispel, my guess is you just drop that and play these 2 bears that I told you to skip if you're lacking a Disease Dispel, because that pull sounds insanely cursed. Especially early on in the season, if you don't have a Disease Dispel for your tank, it's going to be very, very rough. So just watch it. You also don't want to fire Disease Dispel too early because there's 4 adds, right? They are going to be a bit staggered, but you're going to want to minimum make sure you're dispelling 2 of the debuffs off. So again, tanks, go in this with all your defensives. Make sure your Disease Dispelling, it's going to be spooky. Otherwise, none of these packs are terribly dangerous. You can honestly, if you're able to move these mobs well, you group this 2 packs together. The problem is like these imps, they just don't really like to move, just because they have so many diff spells they just spam cast. That's the issue. They're not terribly dangerous because again, most of their casts go into the tank and they're not too hard hitting. So you can group this if you want, but otherwise kind of straight shot here towards the last boss, who again, I just never like to click these bosses. There we go. Guys, that is my full guide to Darkheart Thicket in Season 3 of Dragonflight. Hopefully you found this video useful, and if you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like it, including guides just like this one for every single dungeon. We've got plus 20 walkthroughs to help you get Keystone Hero or your portals early on in the season. Those are going to be coming out, so keep an eye out for those. We're going to be doing raid guides for bosses, normal, heroic, and mythic. So again, lots of stuff coming your way. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those down in the comments below, or you can come ask me over on my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I'll be streaming all of my Mythic Plus keys and raid progression once the season actually starts. As always, I have to give a massive thank you to my subscribers over on my Patreon. I really, really do appreciate the support. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.